Once upon a time, in a village in La Mancha, there lived a lean, thin-faced old gentleman whose favourite pastime was to read books about knights in armour. He loved to read about their daring exploits, strange adventures, bold rescues of damsels in distress, and intense devotion to their ladies. In fact, he became so caught up in the subject of chivalry that he neglected every other interest and even sold many acres of good farmland so that he might buy all the books he could get on the subject. He would lie awake at night, absorbed in every detail of these fantastic adventures. He would often engage in arguments with the village priest or the barber over who was the greatest knight of all time. Was it Amadis of Gaul or Palomarine of England? Or was it perhaps a knight of the sun? As time went on, the old gentleman crammed his head so full of these stories and lost so much sleep from reading through the night that he lost his wits completely. He began to believe that all the fantastic and romantic tales he read about enchantments, challenges, battles, wounds, and wooings were true histories. At last, he fell into the strangest fancy that any madman has ever had. He resolved to become himself a knight-errant, to travel through the world with horse and armour in search of adventures. First, he got out some rust-eaten armour that had belonged to his ancestors, then cleaned and repaired it as best he could. Although the headpiece of the helmet was intact, unfortunately, the visor that would have protected the face was gone. Not to be discouraged by this deficiency, however, he fashioned another out of some pieces of stiff paper and strips of iron. In his eyes, it was without a doubt the most splendid helmet ever fashioned. Next, he considered what glorious, high-sounding name he might give his horse who was to bear him on his quest. For though his horse was but a tired hack, practically skin and bones, to him it appeared as magnificent as Bucephalus, the horse of Alexander the Great. After 4 days of inventing and rejecting various names, he at last settled on Rocinante, which he thought sounded suitably grand. He then set about to choose a suitable name for himself. After 8 days of hard consideration, he decided that he would be known as Don Quixote. Following the example of many knights he admired, he decided to proclaim his native land as well, and so called himself Don Quixote de la Mancha. Now, he needed to find a lady whom he might adore and serve, for a knight without a lady is like a body without a soul. It happened that in the neighbouring village there lived a nice-looking farm girl whom he had once admired from a distance. He decided that she would be the lady of his fancy and that she should be known as Dulcinea del Toboso, a name that to his ears sounded musical and anything but ordinary. Now, with all these preparations made, Don Quixote was eager to sally forth. A whole world awaited, full of injustices to be made right and great deeds to be performed. So, clad in his rusty armour, with his improvised helmet tied to his head, Don Quixote mounted Rocinante and started out through the back of the stable yard. But then he had a terrible thought. He had never yet been dubbed a knight. He took comfort, however, in his memory of the many books of chivalry he had read, and determined that, like many of the heroes in those books, which he took for truth, he would simply have himself knighted by the first person that came along. So he rode on under a hot July sun, blissfully happy in his thoughts of how, in years to come, others would read the brave exploits of Don Quixote de la Mancha and his faithful steed, Rocinante.